here for NRB Live at Lunch. We're grateful for all of you joining us, and we've enjoyed these webinars over the last few months. Grateful that you are here with us today. We're very excited because we have a very special guest, Nona Jones, who is a Christian communicator and speaker, and also works with Facebook as part of their faith-based partnerships. Nona has spoken at NRB convention before, so many of you are familiar with her and her ministry. I want to remind folks before we get started with Nona that the NRB convention this year is June 21st through the 25th. And we are in the early bird phase right now. And so if you would like to get that special rate, save $200, you can register right now. We'd love for you to do that. We're excited about having a full in-person convention the end of June. We feel really good about that, talking to the hotel and other folks who are excited about coming. And we'll obviously make sure that we have a safe experience for everybody so they can come and gather safely. But we're very excited about the speakers we have lined up, Paula Ferris, Mark Jobe, and several others, and really the workshops to help us be equipped to communicate the gospel around the world. Well, Nona Jones is no stranger, I think, to all of you. She is a Christian communicator. She is really widely known for having a winsome and bold testimony and a witness for Christ. And she also works with Facebook as part of their faith-based community partnerships. Nona also has a really great book out. Nona, do you want to tell us a little bit about your book?
Sure. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me, and certainly want to say hello to everyone joining virtually. It's always great to be with, I consider the NRB to be an extended part of my family, so it's great to be with you. My book is called From Social Media to Social Ministry, and it's interesting because I started writing the book back in 2018. I really saw the potential for Facebook to be a lever for digital discipleship. And so I started writing it then when I think, many pastors and church communicators were kind of like, yeah, but we use it for marketing. And who would have known that just, 2 years later, that the entire church as we know it all around the world would be relying on social technology to exist fundamentally. And so the book, like I said, I started writing it in 2018. It got released last year, thanks to the providence of God. And so it's just been a blessing to know that it has supported so many ministries during this time of uncertainty. And it's been a true privilege.
Well, I want to start a little bit with your call to ministry and what God has put in your life. And so maybe if you could walk us through a little bit. You've been in Christian ministry for a long time. When did you kind of first feel God calling you to be a Christian communicator?
Sure. Well, I actually did not grow up in a Christian home. I grew up in a home where unfortunately, there was a lot of dysfunction, a lot of abuse. There was a lot of uncertainty. And, I had tried to actually end my life at the ages of 9 and 11. I was really just hopeless, really desperate. And, it wasn't until I was in the 6th grade that a classmate invited me to church, and I didn't know what church was. So I thought we were going to go to her house and just play. But, we went to the church thing, and I'll never forget the preacher, the very first sermon I ever heard. He said, "God is a father to the fatherless." And I had lost my father when I was about 2 years old. And so I had always thought that if he had lived, that my life would have been different. And so having the pastor say that, it really spoke to a need in my heart and in my life. And so I think that's what really catalyzed my faith journey. Shortly after that, I accepted Jesus as Lord of my life. And I had a youth pastor who he saw potential in me, and he started to just pour into me and give me opportunities to teach my peers. And so I think from there, started teaching Sunday school. And when I was about 16 years old, I was leading the youth ministry at our church. And I said to my pastor, I said, I really feel like I've been called to preach the gospel. And, I don't know what to do with this. And he said to me, he said, I see it too. And so about a year later, I got licensed into ministry at 17 years old. And I really just started preaching and teaching around the city and around my state. And in college, I was very active in ministry in college. Graduated from college and married my husband, whose father pastored a church that he started. And about 6 years ago, my husband and I have been married for, it'll be 17 years this year, which is crazy. About 6 years ago, my husband's father retired. And so my husband stepped into the senior leadership role. And I've been supporting him there in our local church. And in addition to that, I'm very, very fortunate to have an itinerant ministry where I get to, travel around the country and the world. I think I've preached on almost every continent at this point. I was supposed to go to Singapore last year. That didn't quite work out, but God has been really, really faithful. And so, the ministry has taken me to places. I have to tell you this. What I love about traveling and preaching is being able to see faith in so many different cultural contexts. And I think it makes me so grateful for what we have here in the United States. And I think in the context of church communications, especially, I was in Egypt. I think this was about a year and a half ago, and was preaching at a conference over there. And I remember several women came up to me after the fact, and they said, after they were women who were born into Muslim families in Egypt, and they said, we have an ID card that says what our religion is, and they said, you are allowed to change your religion from Christian to Muslim, but you're not allowed to change it from Muslim to Christian. And, it really just made me so aware of just how blessed we are to be able to, freely preach the word of God, freely gather in the name of Jesus. And so, that's been my journey. And it's something I truly love being able to do.
Well, today, communication is different than the ways our parents might have done ministry, or in terms of the technological tools available to us. I think of just growing up in the church, and it was a big deal to put the lyrics on the screen, and we thought we were really cool because maybe when we first had a website. So what are the challenges, I guess, and opportunities of communicating in the digital age as you see it?
Sure. Well, let me first say, so when you were giving that example of putting lyrics up on the screen, it occurred to me, I remember when I walked into a church and they were using transparencies, and they had,
I remember that.
yeah, and you had to change out the different
Yes.
transparencies like that. That was super high tech. And we were like, yes, everybody can see the words. So it's amazing how much we have grown and matured. I think the challenge with digital ministry is, in many ways, it's philosophical, and I think we've seen this in a very real way, especially over the last year, which is we oftentimes think of ministry as, full contact sport, like eyeball to eyeball. I have to see you, I have to touch you, like it has to happen in person. And so what I've seen over the last year, and especially in the 3.5 years that I've been in my role at Facebook, is the shift to digital ministry wasn't necessarily complicated, complex, difficult. Tactically, I should say. I think the challenge was just the mental model of what ministry is. And it's, many times we think church is a place you go. It's a program you watch. And so I think what digital ministry really allows us to do is to seize the 168 hours per week that people should be living out their faith. And yet that also presents a very real challenge, with my husband and I pastoring a local church, we know that it takes a lot of time and energy to plan for even, your Sunday service. And then to have to think about, okay, what do we do the other 166 hours of the week? That's challenging. I think there's also the intimidation factor. So I know of several pastors who they've said, we're not going all in. And this was before COVID, of course. They said, we're not going all in on digital ministry because, if we do, the people will stop coming. And so that's been an interesting thought, because the last statistic I saw before COVID was that 2 out of 3 churches were declining or plateauing in attendance already. That's 66%. And yet you had many pastors who were experiencing that decline who said, I'm not going to lean into digital technology because the people may not come. So even though their fear was being realized, they didn't want to take advantage of it. So I do think the intimidation factor matters. And then, there's the reality that, there's not a lot of help in smaller churches, right? So many times the pastor's doing it all. There may be like a couple of people helping to lead the church. And so the idea of adding something else on top of what's already a pretty difficult situation, I think can oftentimes make people say, we can't do it. But that's part of the reason why I wrote my book, is because I wanted people to know you don't have to have a huge, fully resourced staff. You really just have to have a passion and a willingness to learn in order to meet people where they are. So those are just some of the things that I think have presented challenges to people.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit. Last year when COVID, it's hard to believe it's been a whole year, but then
Yeah.
then it also feels longer than a year. But when COVID hit, a lot of if you're a mega church, you probably already had a pretty robust digital ministry. But for most churches in the United States that are not mega churches, medium-sized churches, smaller churches, were really forced to pivot to digital quickly.
Mhm.
And I just want to just ask you about that. Facebook became a really indispensable tool for a lot of those churches that may not have had a sophisticated web operation,
Mhm.
but everybody in their congregation has Facebook and they could quickly get that going. Just talk about the role that Facebook played in that, and maybe some of the things behind the scenes that y'all were kind of doing quickly to help enable churches and faith-based ministries and anybody gathering to be able to do worship and do meetings online.
Sure. Well, let me first acknowledge the fact that, Facebook is not a perfect tool. So let me just say, there were many times when I would have pastors reach out to me and, they would say our live stream came down, or, something's missing on our, platform. But having said that, our team also recognized that, to your point, Facebook in many cases was like a last resort. And so we had engineering teams on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to make sure that the infrastructure would work. Because, we literally had every church on earth, like not just here in the US, we had every church on earth suddenly having to rely on this platform. And so the infrastructure had to be shored up to meet that need. I think what was really interesting to me is, and I'll talk about our own personal local church as an example, before COVID, I think for the most part, we had a Facebook group, we were live streaming, but it definitely was not central to our ministry strategy. It was something that we did because people were there, but it was not necessarily a central anchor part of our strategy. We had many people in our congregation, older people in particular, who weren't on Facebook. They had no reason to be. They were coming to the church building for the program. But then after COVID, when we really went deep and it was like, look, this is where we're going to be, we had people joining the platform who had no idea what to do, and so we had to do some Zoom trainings to teach people, this is how you use Facebook, this is how you download it. There were times where we had to actually, help somebody like walk through how to download an app because they had never downloaded an app at all. And so I think, knowing that that was the level of digital literacy that people had, we put in the systems and the training and the tools to meet people where they were. I think on the flip side, the broader macro side of Facebook, like I said, recognizing that so many people were relying on the platform meant that we took every effort we could in order to meet the need where it was. And so I also made sure that my team was reaching out proactively to pastors, not just megachurch pastors, but pastors of churches of all sizes, to understand, like, okay, what do you need? What's working? What's not working? And then giving that feedback to our product team, so that it was kind of this, symbiotic relationship where it's like, all right, we want to help you. We want to be there for you. We also need you to tell us what's not working so that we can make it better. And I think that while everyone was challenged, every church on earth was challenged, Facebook was challenged too, and did our best to really rise to the occasion. And, we're continuing to work on it. We're continuing to grow, continuing to try to improve, because the reality is this This is not just, and I've heard the phrase, we want to return to normal. I don't know that there's a normal to return to. I think we're in a completely new approach to ministry. And so we just want to make sure that as a company that we're meeting the needs and we're meeting the moment so that ministries who want to continue to go deep with digital and go out into the deep, Matthew 4:19, Jesus said, hey, come follow me. I'll send you out to be fishers of men. We want to help those ministries that want to do that on the platform.
Yeah, that's really good. And I just want to give another couple plugs here. One for your book, Nona's book, From Social Media to Social Ministry, which is a great book. You can find that anywhere books are sold. We'll try to put that here in the chat so that you have a link to that. Great book to just help you and your church really take your digital ministry to the next level. Also want to just again remind people that of the NRB convention, November 21st through June 21st to the 25th. We all got our months wrong. June 21st to the 25th. One of the emphasis that we're going to do this year is on church media. And I know a lot of churches that had to pivot to digital quickly, but they want to keep doing this even as they begin gathering again. And we want to help equip you how to take that to the next level. So we've got a lot of workshops and forums and things that are geared toward that. So June 21st, 25th, you can register there. So Nona, I want to back up a little bit. We've talked about what Facebook is doing, but I want to back up a little bit about here you are a Christian communicator and you're helping with your husband's leadership at the church there, and you're doing all this, and talk about the call to go help Facebook, help faith-based ministries. What that was like and how you see your role there.
Well, I get asked pretty frequently because most people, if let's just call it like it is. Most Christians in particular, they look at Facebook. They're like, Facebook is anti-faith, Facebook is anti-Christian. Huh. And so I hear that all the time. But Facebook really pursued me, not in spite of my faith, but because of my faith. And so I'll give you the story, because when people ask, how did you end up at Facebook? The answer is God. And that's it. I was in a job that I loved back in April of 2017, thought I would be in it for the rest of my life. I truly felt it was a calling. And I was in prayer one day and the Lord said to me, this assignment is over. Very specific phrase, which, caught me off guard. As you can imagine, you're doing something you love. And then God is like, this assignment is over. It's like, I don't think I heard that right. So I prayed again a few days later. Exact same thing. This assignment is over. That's what I heard. And so I was like, all right, Lord. And I know the voice of God. I'm really attuned to the voice of God. And so I said, okay, if this assignment is over, then what do you want me to do next? And the only thing God said was to resign at the end of the fiscal year, which would have been June 30th, 2017. So fast forward to that day. Again, that was the middle of April. Fast forward to June 30th, 2017. It was a Friday. I met with my boss that day. It was like 1:00 p.m. Gave her my letter of resignation. And of course she was like, well, what are you going to do? You can't just leave. Like, what do I tell the board? And all I could tell her is I said, listen, I'll tell you soon. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't really know what I want to tell this woman, but hopefully God will tell me soon so I can tell her something. But we finished talking around 1:40 and I got in my car. I was driving back home, and at 2:05, my cell phone rang, and it was an unfamiliar number. It was just a 650 area code, said San Francisco, California. And I just assumed it was a telemarketer. And so I wasn't going to answer it, but the Spirit said to take the call. And so I did. And when I answered, a woman on the other end said, is this Nona Jones? And I said, yes. And she said, I'm calling from Facebook. And I was like, Facebook doesn't call people. Who is this? And so she proceeded to tell me that the week before this all happened, Mark had changed the mission of the company to focus on community building. And she said he had some research done in order to understand what are all the different types of communities that exist in the world. And they found, parenting and recreation communities and neighborhoods and all that. But he was surprised to find that the largest community that was the most meaningful to the people who were in them was the faith community. And so she said, they wanted to put together a strategy to support the faith community globally. And my name had been given as someone to talk to about it. Now, mind you, I'm thinking they're putting together a committee or an advisory board or something like that. And I was more than happy to serve. So I was like, look, send me some information. I'll be happy to look at when I get home. I open up the email and there's a link to a job description. And I was like, what is it? So I told my husband, I said, honey, I said, Facebook just sent me a job description. And he was like, well, why would they do that? And the kicker of it, I mean, the whole thing is God, but the kicker of it was on the job description, it said the position was located in Menlo Park, California, at their headquarters, at the headquarters. My husband and I had decided early on in our marriage that Gainesville, Florida would be home because this is where his father's church was. And we knew he was going into ministry. And so immediately I was like, well, I guess that's out because we have been assigned to Gainesville, Florida to support this local church. So when I talked to the lady, I said, this is an incredible opportunity. I would love to do this. I said, but I can't move. And so if that takes me out of the running, I totally understand. And the woman said to me, well, we have a policy as a company that you do have to live where your position is located, but we think you're the right person for this. And so we'll figure out how to accommodate. And so I was like, all right, then sign me up. And so the story of how I got to Facebook, again, is just nothing but God. And that's part of the reason why, being at Facebook, I see this as a calling. And so I love having these types of conversations because I know, the platform isn't perfect, but I'm also on the inside and my team and I are working to try to be a voice of faith and make sure that that the platform meets the need of the ecosystem globally.
Yeah, it's such a great story and a great ministry that you're able to be there and be a witness both inside Facebook, but also to help faith communities. And no institution and no platform is perfect. So you're anywhere you're going, you're joining people who are sinners, as we believe as Christians. Um, uh, Obviously, it's interesting that you have this calling, and you could not have predicted that we'd be in a COVID environment, and your position would be so crucial to helping faith communities be online and get connected. One of the things I think we've learned during COVID is just how much we crave human connection, and
Mhm.
the relationship with technology is a tension, right? That uh, we really know that we need to be in person, ultimately, like embodied um, interaction with people. Even when we gather for church, there's nothing replaces being there, and yet we have these technologies like Facebook that allow us to be somewhat connected in a time when we oftentimes can't, and particularly during the height of COVID that we really couldn't. So just talk about how people of faith can use technology to both enhance, to deepen our connections, but also come alongside that human connection too. I think sometimes we think it's either in
Yeah.
person or technology, and really it seems like we can use one to enhance the other.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Many times we think it's an either or proposition when really it's both and.
Mhm.
There's no hard and fast rule that says you can either meet in person or you can live stream, right? You can do both. I think some of the things that are really important for us to remember as Christians is we are called to be in community. I mean, the Bible tells us not to forsake fellowship with one another, and so I think it's really important that we pursue fellowship. Some of the ways that we can do that through technology, of course, I think video chat platforms have proven to be really, really beneficial. I know that many times we're zoomed out, by the end of the day because we're on these things all day long. But I will tell you, I've had some of my most memorable experiences over this last year, just getting together with some friends from the church and just having a fellowship over Zoom and just eating with each other. There's a product called Rooms that's built into Facebook groups, which is basically like Zoom on Facebook, where we can, go live in the group and we can eat together. We did a women's conference, fully virtual women's conference in our Facebook group, where we did like scavenger hunts in our homes, and we had door prizes and all types of fun things. So I think part of the goal of physical connection really is about just seeing each other and feeling like you're together and in each other's space. And so using social technology and any technology platform, I think, to create a community where you can see each other, where you can laugh together, is really important. It doesn't have to always be a teaching moment. And that's something my husband and I talk about often. Is I think sometimes where we do fail as Christian communicators is we get so focused on the teaching side of the faith that we forget that the fellowship side is just as important. And so creating spaces to have fun. There are several websites that I've even visited myself of people who have come up with some really cool virtual games that you can play with people around the country. It doesn't have to be in your city, but being intentional about that, I think really, really matters.
That's really good. I want to explore that a little bit. You mentioned the rooms feature, and one of the other things I think was kind of happening before COVID, but I think COVID has really kind of given it oxygen is just Facebook Bible studies. You see these all the time with some well-known teachers, but even just church groups doing these Facebook Bible studies have really taken off. So just talk about the prevalence of those, and maybe talk about maybe some other tools and other ways that we can do digital discipleship that maybe people aren't thinking of.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you brought up this digital Bible study trend, because one of the just beautiful things that I've seen that has come out of COVID is there is so much more exposure to the things of God on social media. Whereas before, somebody might have made a post with a scripture, or they might have shared somebody else's post. I have seen so many people going live to share their faith, to share their testimonies, things that they might have done in a church program. They're actually doing in newsfeed. And so that has been just really, really cool. Our church, as a matter of fact, we're about to, this week, we just kicked off our small group semester, which we're doing multiple ways. We're doing on Facebook, we're doing through Zoom, and just trying to get people together to fellowship. But the cool thing is, because you have the ability to go live on Facebook, now you're not necessarily having a small group in the corner of a coffee shop that no one knows about. You can actually share your small group with the broader community, and people can see, oh my goodness, there are Christians getting together, talking about real issues, praying together, supporting each other. And so I do think that it's really important that as you are thinking about how to approach digital ministry, that you're incorporating community and putting Christian community on display. Those are the types of things that I think make people say, I want to be a part of that. I don't really know what it is, but I want to be a part of something that is safe and supportive and inspiring. And that's what people need. I mean, I've seen so many people over this last year who have dealt with discouragement and isolation, and those things are very real. I think that we, however, we have the antidote to that because we have the hope of Jesus. And so now we have to just use these tools in order to get that out into the world. I will say too, as we think about church communications in particular, I would say in like a broadcast context, something I've been recommending, I do a lot of work with broadcast affiliates in Australia. And Australia is very much so a post-Christian society. Okay. So a lot of times we think here in the US, oh, it's just a post-Christian. No, it's not. When you go to Australia or London, you see it. But something that the broadcasters there have started to do is also create Facebook groups as well as a space to inspire people, inspire their listeners and people who maybe don't listen to them, but they're interested in the inspiration side, and having a space that's safe where people can connect with each other. So those are just a few things I would suggest.
Yeah, and you just don't know who, I think about all the digital ministry. You just don't know whose life will be impacted by your church service or by your Bible study, or who's going to join up, who needs a word from the Lord that day. It's really cool to see. And what's interesting too, Nona, is to see the kind of connection between Facebook and social media and some of the traditional broadcast medium. So we have a lot of, as you know, a lot of radio and television
Yeah.
stations and networks that are part of our membership that are doing incredible work, particularly during COVID, reaching people that can't get out to church. But the way that they're able to kind of use technology in ways to enhance what they're already doing,
Mhm.
which is really pretty cool. Just a couple more questions. I know you've been gracious with your time, and we're so thankful to have you. There's been a lot of conversation about um, the positive and negative effects of social media and
Yeah.
screen time and ways it can divide us. So how do you encourage people of faith, particularly Christians, but all people of faith, to utilize these platforms, but also, talk about the way we conduct ourselves on these platforms, and then also continue to prioritize our offline, relationships as well?
Yeah, I started laughing because I think we have to remember, I have yet to see, and I see a lot of posts. I have yet to see a post where somebody said something, controversial, and somebody disagreed with them And by the end of the conversation, the person who disagreed was like, "Thank you so much for what you said. I now have changed my mind." And the reason why I say that is because, I think we always have to, because remember, we know this, but we have to remember it. We are not our own. And so when we speak, I don't speak as Nona. I speak as a Christ follower. And I know this most real because internally, whenever I make a post, we have an internal Facebook at Facebook. Whenever I make a post, many colleagues look at it as the Christian Nona, not just as, oh, this is Nona making a statement. And so I say that because we have to remember that the way we conduct ourselves, the type of conversation, and I'm not saying to not bring up something that people don't want to hear, because truth is truth. But I do think that we have to do it in such a way that we're always pointing people to the cross. We're always pointing people to love and redemption, and that's the key. What I've seen happen, unfortunately, is that people tend to just want to argue and just want to prove their point. And the Bible tells us that it's only by pride comes contention, only by pride comes strife. And so I do think that in our quest to be, light, in our quest to be salt, in our quest to offer truth, we have to always make sure that it's also wrapped with love and compassion, and that we actually care for the other people that we're sharing it to. And so practically what this looks like. So last summer, I didn't plan on doing this, but the Lord led me to do it. I founded a new social justice organization called Faith and Prejudice. It sits at the intersection of racial justice and the Christian faith. And so we work with churches to really help them wrestle with these issues of racial inequity that have a historical basis in this country. And what does that mean for us? And have a historical basis in the church, which many people don't realize. Many of the inequities that we have today are because of decisions that were made in the church. And so I believe the church has to take a leadership role on that. Now, I say that because we have gotten all types of pushback. We're a Christian organization. We love the Lord. We've gotten all types of pushback from other Christians. But what I've told my team is I said, listen, it's not our role to go back and forth and fight with people. Like, we've had people call us idiots and Marxists and socialists and communists and all these things. And it's, of course, it's jarring, because in your mind, you're like, okay, these people don't know that we love the Lord. But what I've trained my team to do is I say, look, don't go back and say you're wrong, you're dumb, you're this, you're that, because that doesn't get you anywhere. Ask them, why do you believe what you believe? Why do you think what you think? Because that is how you actually start to understand people, right? Like, and I think our job as Christians is to always lead with compassion. Even if somebody's calling us a name, it's like, okay, well, why do you feel the way that you feel? And I cannot tell you how many times we have engaged people who have come at us in an attacking way, and we've engaged with them in a loving way. And by the time we end the conversation, they will say they may not necessarily agree with us. Their opinion may not have changed, but they appreciate the way that we engaged. And it's that idea of winning your brother, winning your sister. So that's what I would recommend is, don't get into the back and forth. Just try to understand where people are coming from. And by understanding where they're coming from, then you can actually, with wisdom, engage in a thoughtful conversation.
That's a great word. I think of 1 Peter 3:15, where it says, have an answer for every person for the hope that lies within you, but
Yes.
do it with gentleness and kindness, that we can have courage, but also have civility at the same time. And it is interesting too, Nona, that we always feel like taking a stand means that I have to do this online right now, that sometimes
Right.
an offline conversation, calling somebody up, or it's weird how we feel that in this digital age, we have to have a public opinion about everything. Whereas like, I think 20 years ago, some random person 5 states away, I didn't know what he thought about some global crisis, but now everyone has to have an opinion. So I love the way that you framed that, there's a way to do this with truth and love and try to understand people and really see the human connection behind what they're doing. But thank you for joining us today, Nona. And I'm grateful for your ministry and for your leadership and really advocating for faith communities on Facebook and really helping churches get connected. I think of those early days of the pandemic where, you know, churches were scrambling to get online, were scrambling to do their services, and Facebook was really a good tool to help them. And so I want to encourage folks to get your book from social media to social ministry, to get Nona Jones's book, and also to consider coming to our NRB convention. That's June 21st through the 24th. And we're going to have all kinds of information on church media, on traditional media, on digital media, film, everything else. But thank you, Nona, for joining us today. And I didn't know if there's a final word you wanted to say to our members and all those who are registered here.
Oh, well, first of all, again, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everyone who joined. It's so funny you brought up 1 Peter 3, because I was reading that very verse this morning and I posted it internally in our Christians at Facebook group as a reminder, that, and the verse basically goes on to say, to summarize it, that we are to demonstrate through our actions, our belief in Jesus. Like, we're not supposed to go back and forth. And it talks about it's better to suffer for doing good than doing evil. And so I try to remind my colleagues, and I would just remind everyone here, that, we literally are the reflection of Jesus in the world. There are many people who are deciding whether or not they will follow Christ based on how we show up. And so I try to remember that in the way that I just conduct myself, both internally in Facebook and then outside of Facebook. So just a thought. Yeah. 1 Peter 3, let's meditate on that, so that God can be glorified in all that we do.
Thank you. And Nona, what's the best way if people want to read you or get a hold of some of the things you're working on? What's the best website or place that they can go?
Sure. Oh, thanks for offering. Well, so there were a couple questions actually in the chat, and I just put it on here. So the organization I mentioned, it's called Faith and Prejudice. You can go to faithandprejudice.com. That's faithandprejudice.com. Or you can find us on Facebook, literally Faith and Prejudice on Facebook. Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, you can connect with me at Nona, not Nora. I get called Nora Jones all the time, but my name is Nona Jones. So it's at Nona, not Nora. And you can connect with me on all platforms.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that. And we want to thank everybody for joining us today here for our NRB Live at Lunch. We've got a few others that are in the works that we're planning for the next several months, and we'll let you know about those. If you were not able to see the whole session, we will also send an email out to everyone who registered with the link to be able to watch it later, and also links to some of the things we talked about. But for now, we want to sign off and thank Nona Jones for joining us, and thank all of you for joining us today.